Okay, so today we're going deep on Ted Bundy.
All right.
You guys sent in some really intense material for this one.
Yeah, some dark stuff.
It is, it is. And we've got excerpts from his Wikipedia page to give us the basic facts,
Hmm?
but also a YouTube transcript from Carol Daronch's channel.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, for those who don't know, she's a survivor of Bundy's.
Right.
And in her video, she interviews people who were involved in the investigation. So,
Oh, that's interesting.
yeah, so we're going to try to use these sources today to move beyond the headlines and the basic Bundy story that everyone kind of knows
Okay.
and explore the inconsistencies in his own accounts, the pivotal moments, and what all of that tells us about this guy.
Sounds good. Where do we start?
Well, I think a good place to start is with his early life.
Okay, his childhood.
Yeah, and see if we can find any clues there, any seeds of what was to come.
Right. Like, what kind of kid was he?
Exactly. The sources you sent in actually highlight some pretty interesting and often contradictory details about his time in Tacoma.
Oh.
Yeah. When he was talking to Michaud Ainsworth for his biography, he told him of, searching through garbage for nude pictures.
Mm.
But then later, he told Paulie Nelson, his lawyer, that he was super into detective magazines and crime novels, especially the ones that depicted sexual violence.
Hmm. Huh. So different stories.
Yeah, and then it gets even weirder. In a letter to Anne Rule, he completely denies ever reading those true crime magazines. He says he found the whole idea repulsive.
Wow. So which is it?
We don't know.
Yeah.
And that's what's so fascinating and frustrating about Bundy.
Right from the beginning, he's not reliable.
Exactly. Even about seemingly small details. It makes you question everything he ever said.
Yeah, you can't really trust anything he says.
And then there's this other thing he confessed to Michaud. He called it his late-night canvassing.
Canvassing.
Yeah, basically he would go out looking for undraped windows so he could observe women.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I mean, that's a pretty disturbing admission of voyeuristic behavior right there.
Definitely. That's not normal behavior.
And here's where it gets even more interesting. Psychologist Al Carlisle has some thoughts about this.
Okay.
He said Bundy wasn't just passively watching these women.
Oh.
He was actively fantasizing about them.
Really?
Yeah. And apparently he would even practice mimicking politicians' accents, like he wanted to be someone important or someone different.
Uh-huh. Someone different.
Right, like trying on different personas even back then.
I see. Like he wasn't comfortable with who he was.
Yeah, and Carlisle connected this to some early theories of psychopathy,
Okay.
suggesting that maybe Bundy lacked a sense of self and was kind of always role-playing.
That makes sense with the different stories he told too.
Right, like he's constructing this image of himself, but it keeps changing.
Exactly.
So you can see how all these little details from his early life start to add up to something pretty unsettling.
Yeah, it's like we're seeing these glimpses into his inner world, and it's a world that's filled with fantasy and maybe even a disconnect from reality.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder, right? Like, where do these urges come from? When do they start?
It's a question a lot of people have asked.
And there are no easy answers.
No, definitely not. But it's fascinating to consider how early these patterns might emerge.
Absolutely. So let's move on to the actual crimes.
Okay, the disappearances.
Yeah. The first one mentioned in the Wikipedia excerpt is Roberta Kathleen Parks in May of 1974.
Okay.
Bundy later confessed to luring her from Oregon State University, taking her to Washington, and then,
Wow.
yeah. And then just a month later, in June 1974, Brenda Carroll Ball disappeared in Burien, Washington.
Another disappearance.
Right. And she was last seen talking to a man with an arm in a sling,
Arm sling.
which will become a really important detail later on.
Okay, I'll keep that in mind.
Now, Bundy eventually confessed to Ball, too.
He did.
Yeah. He said he met her at a bar and they went back to his place and had consensual sex.
Consensual.
That's what he claimed.
Oh.
But he said he strangled her in her sleep.
Oh, wow.
But here's where things get tricky.
What do you mean?
Well, the autopsy showed that Ball had significant damage to her skull.
So he didn't tell the truth?
Exactly. It's a pretty big inconsistency. And it suggests that he wasn't being entirely honest about what really happened.
No surprise there, I guess.
Right. It's like he's trying to control the narrative, even in his confessions.
Trying to make himself look better.
Maybe. Or maybe he just couldn't face the full reality of his actions.
Could be.
Now, around the same time that Ball disappeared, Jorgen Hawkins vanished from the University of Washington.
Another college student.
Yeah, and this case is particularly chilling because it really shows Bundy's audacity.
What do you mean?
Well, he confessed to luring Hawkins with a crowbar, handcuffing her, and then strangling her in Issaquah.
Oh, wow.
But here's the crazy part. He later went back to the crime scene like in broad daylight to retrieve her earrings and a shoe.
No way. Back to the crime scene.
Yeah, and he did it without being seen. Robert Keppel, the lead detective, called it a feat so brazen that it astonishes police even today.
Mm-hmm.
Bundy himself admitted to visiting Hawkins' body on 3 separate occasions.
Wow, that's so bold.
Right. It's like he was playing a game with the police.
Almost like he wanted to get caught.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Or maybe he just enjoyed the thrill of getting away with it.
That's creepy.
It is really creepy. Now, at this point, the police still didn't have a clear link between these disappearances.
Oh, really?
Yeah, other than the fact that they were all young, attractive, white college students with long, middle-parted hair.
So no physical evidence or anything?
Not really. Not enough to connect the dots.
It makes it so much harder for the police.
It does. And it allowed Bundy to continue his spree for much longer.
So what happened next?
Well, the next big event is what really changed the game.
Okay, what's that?
The Lake Salmon mission in July 1974.
What happened there?
It was a beautiful summer day, and the beach at Lake Samish was packed with people. And in broad daylight, Bundy abducted 2 women, Janice Ann Ott and Denise Marie Naslund.
In broad day.
Can you imagine the terror?
That's unbelievable.
It is. Several witnesses came forward to describe this handsome young man who called himself Ted.
Ted?
Yeah. He was wearing a white tennis outfit, had an arm in a sling, and spoke with a slight accent. He told people he needed help with his sailboat.
The arm sling again.
Exactly. And he even had this bronze-colored VW Beetle.
It's all coming together.
One witness actually almost went with him, but at the last minute, she decided not to.
Oh, wow.
Another witness saw Ott leave with him,
That's so scary.
and Naslund vanished after she went to use the restroom.
So he was very good at gaining people's trust.
He was.
Hmm.
Bundy later gave conflicting accounts about what happened to Ott and Naslund.
Like what?
Well, he told some people that Ott was still alive when he brought Naslund back, and that he made one of them watch while he killed the other.
Oh, my God.
But then he later denied this.
So we don't know for sure what happened?
Right. And that's part of what makes this case so frustrating. We may never know the full truth.
Yeah, but the police were finally getting some leads, though, right?
They were. The Lake Sammamish abductions were a huge turning point.
Okay, how so?
Well, they finally had a name, Ted. They had a description of his car, and they had the detail about the arm sling.
So the investigation could finally focus on one person.
Exactly. And that leads us to Utah and the Carol Durange incident in November 1974.
Who is Carol Durange?
She's a remarkable woman. She actually survived an encounter with Bundy and was able to give the police invaluable information.
What happened?
Well, Bundy approached her in a shopping mall, pretending to be a police officer.
He was posing as a cop.
Yeah. He called himself Officer Roseland and told her that someone had tried to break into her car.
Wow, that's bold.
He asked her to come with him to the police station to file a report. But she started getting suspicious when they didn't seem to be heading in the right direction.
I bet.
And that's when Bundy pulled over and tried to handcuff her.
Did he have a weapon?
It doesn't say in the transcript.
Okay.
But during the struggle, he accidentally handcuffed one of her wrists to itself.
He messed up.
He did. And that gave Durange the opportunity to escape.
That's incredible.
She was so brave. Her quick thinking and her courage saved her life. And her testimony was crucial in helping the police understand Bundy's methods.
Right, like his MO.
Exactly. So now let's fast forward a bit to November 1975. There was a big meeting in Aspen, Colorado.
A meeting about Bundy.
Yes. Investigators from several states, Utah, Washington, Colorado, all came together to compare notes and share information.
Okay.
And after that meeting, they were pretty sure that Bundy was their guy.
But did they have enough to arrest him?
Not for murder. They needed more evidence. But they did have enough to charge him with the Durange.
Okay.
So in February 1976, Bundy went on trial for that crime.
What happened?
Well, Bundy actually waived his right to a jury trial.
Really? Why would he do that?
His lawyer advised against it, but Bundy seemed to think he could manipulate the judge. But it didn't work. He was found guilty of and sentenced to 1 to 15 years in Utah State Prison.
Wow, so he was finally behind bars.
Yeah. But even in prison, he couldn't stop scheming.
What do you mean?
They found an escape kit in his cell. It had road maps, airline schedules, a social security card, all kinds of things.
So he was planning to escape.
It seems so. After that, they put him in solitary confinement.
To keep him under control.
Exactly. But he still managed to escape.
He escaped from solitary confinement?
Not exactly. He was actually transferred to Colorado in January 1977 because they were getting ready to charge him with the murder of Karen Campbell.
Okay.
And it was in Colorado that he made his two dramatic escapes.
Two.
Yeah. The first one was from the Aspen courthouse in June 1977. He managed to slip out of the courthouse while everyone was focused on setting up roadblocks.
How did he do that?
He took off some of his clothes and basically just blended in with the crowd.
He was pretty sneaky.
He was. He then broke into a hunting cabin and stole supplies. But then he got lost in the mountains for several days before stealing a car and eventually getting caught.
Wow.
And here's what's interesting. They found maps of the area where Campbell's body had been found in the stolen car.
So he was planning this escape all along?
It seems so.
So that was his first escape.
Yeah. And incredibly, he escaped again just 6 months later.
From prison this time.
Yeah, from the Garfield County Jail.
How did he pull that off?
He spent weeks sawing through the steel bars in the ceiling of his cell.
How did he get a saw?
We don't know for sure, but he was very resourceful.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
And it had lost a bunch of weight so he could fit through the hole in the ceiling.
Wow.
He had also managed to get some money and a change of clothes.
So it was all planned out.
Very much so. And get this. The guards didn't realize he was gone for 17 hours.
17 hours.
Yeah. By that time, he was already long gone.
So he was free again.
Yeah, and that led to his final and most terrifying rampage in Florida. Yeah, he ended up in Tallahassee.
Okay.
And just a week after he got there, he attacked the Chi Omega sorority house at Florida State University.
Oh my God.
It was brutal. He bludgeoned and strangled two women, Margaret Bowman and Lisa Levy, while they slept.
How awful.
He also severely assaulted two other women, Kathy Kleiner and Karen Chandler, but they thankfully survived.
And what about the other people in the house?
There were over 30 other people in the sorority house that night, but no one heard anything.
No one heard him.
It's really strange. The attacks all happened within a 15-minute time frame, but it seems Bundy was so quiet and efficient that no one was alerted.
Wow, that's terrifying.
It is. After the sorority house, he went to a nearby apartment and attacked another woman, Cheryl Thomas.
Another attack.
Yeah, he beat her very badly, and she suffered permanent injuries.
That poor woman.
But this time, he left behind some crucial evidence.
What was it?
Semen and a pantyhose mask that had hairs that matched Bundy's.
Oh, wow. So finally some real physical evidence.
Exactly. But he wasn't done yet.
There's more.
Yeah. A few days later, he tried to abduct another woman, Leslie Parmenter, in Jacksonville.
How did he try to get her?
He pretended to be a firefighter named Richard Burton.
Always with the fake names.
Right. But thankfully, her brother showed up and scared Bundy away.
That was lucky.
It was. But then just a week after that, he abducted and murdered a 12-year-old girl, Kimberly Leach.
Oh, God, no. Not a child.
He lured her away from her school, and her remains were found weeks later.
This is so horrible.
It is. This was a new level of depravity.
I can't believe he got away with it for so long.
It's amazing, isn't it?
It is. So how did they finally catch him?
It actually ended pretty randomly.
Randomly.
Yeah, he was driving a stolen VW Beetle in Pensacola when a cop noticed him and pulled him over.
What happened?
Bundy tried to run, but the cop tackled him and arrested him.
Did he go quietly?
Not really. He resisted arrest, and they found all sorts of incriminating stuff in the car. Fake IDs, stolen credit cards, things like that.
Wow.
Yeah. And when they finally got him in handcuffs, he said something really chilling.
What was that?
I wish you'd kill me.
Wow, that's stark. Like he knew it was over.
Yeah. He was finally caught.
So what happened next?
Well, the trial for the Chi Omega killings was a huge media event.
I bet.
It was the first trial to be nationally televised, and Bundy insisted on acting as his own lawyer.
Oh, wow. Didn't his lawyers try to talk him out of that?
They did, but he wouldn't listen. And his performance in court was a disaster.
How so?
He seemed more interested in being the center of attention than in actually defending himself. His lawyer, Paulie Nelson, later said that he basically sabotaged the entire defense effort.
So he was found guilty?
Yes, on multiple counts of
Hmm.
and he was sentenced to death.
Wow. And what about the other?
Well, in 1986, as he was facing execution, Bundy finally started talking.
He confessed?
He did. He confessed to his lawyers, Hagmeyer and Nelson, and he gave them horrifying details about his crimes.
What kind of details?
He told them about things he did to the bodies after he killed women.
Oh, God. Like what?
He admitted to revisiting the crime scenes, to having sex with the corpses, even to decapitating some of his victims and keeping their heads as trophies.
That's sick. I can't believe he did all that.
It's truly horrifying.
Mm-hmm.
He also gave them insights into his methods, how he would overpower the women, use handcuffs, transport them to secondary locations, and often rape them during the act of strangulation.
So he was very methodical.
He was. And despite all the brutality, Bundy always insisted that he never deliberately inflicted unnecessary suffering on his victims.
Really? Do you believe him?
It's hard to say.
Uh,
He also admitted to posing some of the bodies to look like the covers of detective magazines.
what?
Yeah. So it's hard to reconcile that with his claims of not wanting to cause suffering.
Yeah, that's messed up. It's like he was getting off on the whole thing.
Right. It adds a whole other layer of complexity to the case.
But absolutely.
Now, Bundy gave one final interview just before his execution to a guy named James Dobson.
Who's that?
He's a very well-known conservative Christian psychologist and author. And in this interview, Bundy did something really unexpected. He blamed his crimes on violent media.
Really? That's interesting.
Yeah. And he even suggested that the FBI should be monitoring adult bookstores and movie theaters.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a pretty radical statement.
So do you think he really believed that, or was he just trying to manipulate people?
It's hard to say. He had denied that played a role in his crimes before.
So he was contradicting himself.
Exactly. But a lot of people believe that he was just trying to shift blame away from himself.
To make himself look like a victim?
Maybe. Or maybe he genuinely believed it. We'll never know for sure.
So how many victims did he actually have?
That's another mystery. We know about the ones he was convicted of, but there are many more that he was suspected of.
Like how many?
His lawyer, John Henry Brown, claims that Bundy admitted to over 100 people.
Over 100.
Yeah. And a sheriff who interviewed Bundy said that Bundy hinted at being responsible for women in the 3 digits in 6 states.
Wow, that's a lot of victims.
It is. And it's possible that we'll never know the full extent of his crimes.
It's crazy to think that there might be families out there who still don't know what happened to their loved ones.
Yeah, it's a really sad thought.
So is that it? Is that all we know about Ted Bundy?
Pretty much. There's so much information out there about this case. It's been the subject of countless books, documentaries, movies. But ultimately, I think the biggest takeaway is that Ted Bundy was a master manipulator.
Yeah, he was really good at hiding who he truly was.
He was. And that's what made him so dangerous.
Absolutely.
So after this deep dive into the life and crimes of Ted Bundy, what's your takeaway? What stands out to you the most?
Well, it's hard to choose just one thing. The psychology of a serial killer is fascinating and terrifying at the same time.
Yeah. It's like trying to understand a puzzle where some of the pieces are missing.
And I think that's what's so unsettling about this case. We may never have all the answers. We may never fully understand what drove Bundy to do the things he did.
Right? And that uncertainty is part of what keeps people fascinated by him. And that's what makes this such a complex and disturbing chapter in criminal history.
It really is. It makes you wonder how many other Ted Bundys are out there. How many other monsters are hiding in plain sight just waiting for their chance to strike?
That's a chilling thought. And it's one that we should all keep in mind. Evil can wear many masks, and sometimes the most charming people can be the most dangerous.
That's for sure. So what now? What should our listeners do with all this information?
Well, I think it's important to remember that even though Bundy was a monster, his victims were real people with families and loved ones who are still grieving their loss. So let's honor their memory by being vigilant and by looking out for each other.
Yeah, that's a good point. We can't let fear control our lives, but we can be aware of our surroundings and take precautions to stay safe.
Exactly. And if you ever see something that seems off or suspicious, don't hesitate to report it to the authorities. You never know, you might just save a life.
That's great advice. Thanks for sharing all of this with us.
Of course.
Yeah.
It's been a dark journey, but I think it's important to learn from the past so we can create a better future. Stay safe out there, everyone.
And always trust your gut.